Welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, how safe are our schools when people can easily enter the premises wielding dangerous weapons and brandishing pangas while abducting children, traumatizing young kids in the process? That's the story of a primary school in Katlehong, which once again shows how unsafe schools are. So what needs to be done to protect learners from such violent acts? The Minister of Education, Minister Gwarube, joins us in studio tonight. We'll also discuss other issues, including the many scholar transport accidents and the BELA Bill. Also on the show, what is the situation tonight in Katlehong? There are some community members who took the law into their own hands when they torched a church belonging to Pastor Paseka Mboro Motswaneng, who was brandishing a panga at a primary school while participating in the abduction of his grandchildren. How are the police monitoring the area and ensuring no further incidents flare up? The Gauteng Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Tomi Mtombeni, speaks to us tonight. And then later, is the Middle East now teetering on the verge of a wider regional war following the assassination of the Hamas leader in Iran? The Iranian ambassador to South Africa will respond to that attack and tell us how Iran plans to respond. But first, my comment. So yesterday, many of us were taken aback by the thuggery that was witnessed in Katlehong in Johannesburg. Because let's be honest, that's what it is. It is thuggery. That's where Pastor Paseka Mboro Motswaneng was recorded in a video arriving at a school with armed men to abduct children. Because that's really what it is. They were abducting those kids. They're taking them against their own will. And we now understand these are his grandchildren. So he's seen in this video wielding a panga whilst another man is carrying a firearm, and they force these kids out of the classroom. And the pastor is seen in the video dangerously waving this panga and threatening the staff. At some point, he even charges at a man outside the school. So far we understand that this relates to a custody dispute between the maternal and paternal families involving children enrolled in that particular school. If you don't know what we're talking about, take a look at what transpired yesterday. Now, this man could very well have a good reason to be frustrated by the custody arrangement, right? But is this the way to deal with a disagreement around custody? To behave like a criminal, like a thug, and traumatize the very children that he claims to be protecting? I don't think so. This is a primary school. This incident has traumatized the whole school, the whole community. As a result, the pupils at the school will be provided with psychosocial support. He has to be held accountable for what he has done, together with the men that he went to the school with. Now, having said that, how we respond as a society, as a community, is also important. We must be outraged by what happened here, but we must also be cautious not to respond to criminality with criminality. I mean, some members of the community, most of them school learners, are alleged to have been behind the torching of the church that Mboro is a pastor of. It happened earlier today, just before midday. And you would have thought that these are school children that were supposed to be at school at that time. Take a look at what happened earlier.
So you are moving now?
Vai cheese, Amos.
Vai cheese.
Aí, vai falar.
That's the church now up in flames. Now, the police have since responded to both yesterday's and today's incidents. This is what the authorities had to say earlier.
We responded swiftly, as we know, from the early hours of this morning, past 12 midnight, we're in a position to can arrest 4 people which are linked to the video clip. And further than that, we linked with the NPA, and then we secured the warrant of arrest. And then that warrant of arrest, we executed it, and then we arrested the 5th suspect. Safe to say, the collaborations we're having with the community and the collaborations we're having with government departments, as we know that Department of Education here is affected in terms of the school.
Well, the community itself thinks that it's justified with how it's responded.
We don't want this man here. It's not the first time he's doing this. He likes to harass school children. We don't want him here. There are many rumors about him.
kahle kahle imayelana naye umbhoro le ndaba le. Umbhoro wenze into wrong ngokuya lapha naphambi kweingane ezincane which is.
This thing is about Umporo. Why did he not call aside the person he was looking for? That's why we did this.
Now, we all need to be concerned about the safety of children in schools. What Mboro has done here is criminal, and it's once again highlighting how unsafe our schools can be. There have been many incidents that have called into question the safety of our schools. But I think as a society, we need to ask ourselves serious questions too about our propensity to violence. Why do we so easily resort to violence when we are unhappy, when we are so frustrated? That's what Mboro has done. That's what the community has done in response to his actions. So why do we resort to violence to solve situations? So there is a bigger conversation here about the safety of children and another conversation about our violence as a society. And I think we need to reflect on that. The question we're asking you tonight, though, is what do you make of how Mboro behaved on Monday? And what do you make of how the community has responded to his actions? Are you concerned at all about this propensity to violence? And how concerned are you about the safety of learners in schools after these men threatened teachers and pupils at the Matsidiso Primary School in Katlehong? Please send us a WhatsApp voice note with your comments on 078 459 1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you are sending the voice note from, and always keep those voice notes at 30 seconds, or send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. After the break, the Minister of Basic Education, Minister Gwarube, will speak to us about this issue of safety in schools and other issues. Stay with us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. The Gauteng Education Department says they will continue to provide emotional support to the learners and teachers affected by the violent action of South African Pastor Paseka Mboro Motswaneng and 2 other men. As you've seen earlier in that viral video we showed you, it's there on social media as well. It shows these 3 men violently threatening the teachers and learners at the school, at the Matsidiso Primary School in Katlehong. Motswaneng was seen wielding a panga, and another man is seen with an assault rifle on school premises. Basic Education Minister Minister Gwarube is joining us tonight on Face the Nation. Minister, thank you for making time. Good evening.
Good evening, Clement, and good evening to your viewers.
Let's start with this terrible story of what happened in Katlehong, where learners were abducted by these gun-wielding men with Pastor Mboro wielding a panga. This incident once again shows how unsafe our schools are.
Look, I think the big issue here is that it's showing us our violent societies, Clement, because what we've seen is, you know, in this particular incident, and while I've requested the Minister of Police to expedite the investigation into this matter, but what we have seen here is that, you know, these men, essentially forced themselves onto the school premises with these weapons and essentially gained entry into the school. And so it becomes very difficult for the Department of Education alone to deal with the issue of violence in our communities. And this is why my view, Clement, is that the only way we're going to be able to protect learning and teaching time in schools where we're keeping our learners safe is if we work together as government departments. I think gone are the days where I'm simply going on with my knitting in the Department of Basic Education, the Minister of Police does his own thing. The reality here is that we've got to work across the board as government, because ultimately we may have security guards at certain schools with gates, but when people with weapons get to the gate and threaten that security guard who was not armed, what are we saying about our schools? Are we saying that our schools must have armed men all around them? Is that what it's coming to? But I'm absolutely incensed about this whole thing, because how can somebody gain entry into the school like that and threaten the lives of not only the learners, not only the children concerned, but also the teachers in that school? Because also what it does is that it disincentivizes good educators from wanting to get into the profession, or from even going into our communities where we need them the most, into poorer communities, because they know and they fear that it's not safe. And we've seen, even there was a teacher in KwaZulu-Natal, you remember, who was gunned down just outside of his school. So for me, this points to a broader issue of crime in our society. And when I reached out to the Minister of Police this morning, and I said to him, we absolutely have to ensure the safety of those children is number one. Number two, the arrest of these people. And we must make an example of people like this, that our schools are places of safety, not places for you to come and wield your guns and essentially, assault and threaten people.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, in KwaZulu-Natal, incident of a teacher was gunned down. There are many incidences where teachers have been gunned down in front of the learners. Sometimes the very same criminality is perpetrated by the learners themselves. So are those the conversations you're having with your counterparts in cabinet to ensure that school grounds are once again a safe environment for the learners?
Absolutely. So I think there are a couple of stakeholders that we must look at here. Number one, obviously the department of the ministry, the police minister and the South African Police Service. But also a bigger conversation must be had, Clement, with policing, community policing fora. Because often people who vandalize schools, people who gain illegal entry into schools, people who do all of these things are people known to the community. And this is where community policing fora come in, because they are able to they are embedded in the community, and it's not about simply calling the SABs to come in on an incident. They are there. And so my plea really is that firstly, we need to, as communities, look at schools as assets. We need to look at schools as places of safety for our learners, and we need to take ownership of schools. So when parents or community members see some kind of wrongdoing, they need to be able to report that. But they need to be able to have faith in the policing system. They need to be able to have faith that if I pick up the phone and call the police, that they will arrive. And so that's why I'm saying that this has to be a whole government approach in terms of a response. And I mean, let me make another example around scholar transport. Again, that's something that doesn't sit squarely within the Department of Education. But the Minister of Transport, I'll be reaching out to her to say, how do we make sure that law enforcement, particularly local law enforcement, is looking at whether the people who are driving scholar transport are doing so according to the rules of the road? I think gone are the days where we are not working together as government, because the problems that are dogging our education system, they are simply societal issues. And it distracts us from doing our core business, which is learning and teaching.
Yeah, I mean, scholar transport is another issue, as you indicate, that has probably reached crisis level. I mean, 6 people who died in Middelburg when a bus they were traveling in tried to cross the railway and the train crashed into that vehicle. There was another incident in Lichtenberg involving over 50 learners. 6 people also died in that incident. There was another one in Carltonville. We're losing learners so many times in terms of scholar transport, and you can't really regulate the behavior of taxi drivers. At some point, as citizens ourselves, have to take the responsibility. I mean, you hear of how some of these guys who go pick up these kids, they sit by the park and they're drinking while they wait for the schools to finish and the kids can get into their cars. It has to be a multifaceted approach. So when you speak to the minister, maybe of transport, to law enforcement, what is it that community members themselves can do to try and help deal with this issue that, as I say, is reaching crisis levels?
The thing is, I mean, you know, especially when there's a tragedy befalls a community, you can't simply go there and say, I'm so sorry, you know, this is not something that falls within the ambit of my work. And this is what I said to the DG this afternoon, that DG, I'm sorry, but there's something that we as a department, we have to initiate something. I'm not going to go around looking at parents in the eyes and saying, I'm sorry for their loss. There's nothing more heartbreaking, Clement, than holding a parent in your arms who's lost a 6-year-old child in a way that you believe could have been avoided. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to approach the Department of Transport to say, how do we perhaps look at how law enforcement and the departments of the provincial departments of education can have MOUs where local law enforcement are particularly tracking hotspots during peak traffic. We know what time learners are going to school. We know what time learners are likely coming back from school. So there is a way to be able to track and be able to have extra law enforcement on the road, particularly looking at learner transport. And so that's a conversation that I would like to have with Minister Creasy, because I do believe that there's some powers in her department that could do something. And also a deterrent. As you say, there are some people who are actively, you know, drinking and smoking or taking drugs before they go and pick up learners. It will serve as a deterrent, because if one person is caught being drunk or driving fast with learners, and if their car is marked as a driver of learner transport, even the community can say, no man, you know, I can see, here's a central number that I can call and report reckless behavior or reckless driving. So it will also serve as a deterrent from people to know that I will have to get accredited and I'll never get work from the department again if I'm taken off the system. So we have to at least tighten some systems on our side too.
All right, let's talk about the BELA Bill now. It's still on the president's desk. He's actually been signing lots of bills recently, but he hasn't touched this one in particular. Are you still appealing to him to send it back to Parliament? Do you think he should do that?
Look, I mean, you know, the prerogative now rests with the president, and he's got to apply his mind, and it would be improper of me to circumvent that process. Of course, the parliamentary process unfolded, and the department had inputs into the bill, and now it sits before the president, and he's got to apply his mind. We do know that there are sections of the bill that sectors of the education sector are not all in agreement with. But I also must say, Clement, that a lot of some of the concerns that were initially raised about the BELA Bill have in fact been removed in the latest version of the bill. And there were some grave concerns, and parents, for instance, had issues with things like selling of alcohol for adults in schools for fundraising purposes. Those things, for instance, have been removed. And so there are perhaps maybe 2 sections in the bill that people are mostly still concerned about, and it's around the autonomy of school governing bodies and their ability to be able to exercise their governance role. And so I think the president is well appraised of some of the discomfort around that, and he must apply his mind. And for me, as the Minister of Education, our role now as a department is done, and I can't circumvent that process and appeal to him or ask him to do anything. The reality is that now, even though I came in at the end of the process, I now assume the role of the Minister of Education, and I must now wait until we get some feedback from the President.
Yeah, I mean, there are some aspects of the bill that actually work well for the basic education department. You look at what it says about expanding the definition of corporal punishment, what it says about grade R being the compulsory school starting grade. It proposes measures to prevent the unnecessary disruption of schooling by protests or other causes, including criminalizing such actions. It will also introduce penalties for parents who deliberately keep their children out of school for extended periods. What exactly is the concern from even some of the SGBs about the issue of SGBs taking the Department of Education taking that power away from them? Do you think that is the deal breaker that would require that send the bill back to Parliament, or do you think in the way that it's been updated, especially after the NCOP, that should at some point satisfy everyone?
I am very concerned, Clement, about the bill being locked in litigation. So that is my personal problem, because as you point out, there are specific sections of this bill which are so desperately needed in the system.
Urgently.
One of them is the universal access to grade R in our schools. We know that in South Africa we've got unacceptably low literacy levels. The best way we can do this is, one, by starting learners at a much earlier stage to introduce them to reading, writing, and manipulating simple mathematical equations at an earlier age. If you go to a school that is well off in a suburb, you probably went to a prep school, you went to a grade R. By the time you got to grade 1 and you turned 7, you were probably able to read and write for meaning. But many kids from from Equa, they only ever engage with a book for the first time at the age of 7. So if we're going to really catch up with the rest of the world in terms of getting up to speed with our literacy levels, we have to start getting learners into the education system much earlier. So I'm concerned about the bill being stuck in litigation for many years and us not being able to enforce that. And so I'm hoping that in the deliberation, the president can look at what is available to him. But I honestly think that none of these things are insurmountable. I think that, for instance, some of the unhappiness around the SGB powers, I think that even just the changing of simple wording could even suffice. But again, the president now has access to submissions that were submitted in Parliament, and his team has a full view of what the bill seeks to do. But I would hate for the bill to be stuck in ongoing litigation, and now we lose out on key aspects of it that we so desperately need. For me, my key priorities in this 5 years, there are only two really that are critical for me: improving literacy levels and ensuring that learners are kept safe in schools, including making sure that infrastructure is well organized and there are no pit toilets or inappropriate infrastructure. And so to get that, there are multiple things that we need to do. And so there are important aspects of this bill which I don't want us to throwing it out with the bathwater and losing out on being able to improve the sector in general.
Lastly, on the BELA Bill, part of what's been raised by the SGBs is that, well, we don't want you to take away the power we have to even decide on the language policy, for instance, of the schools. But when you hear from SATU and some of the other unions, they're saying that is necessary for the department, for this decision to sort of be centralized, the department, because there have been instances of discriminatory admission practices observed in some schools where they tell you this is an Afrikaans school and you've got children whose mother tongue is not even Afrikaans, and yet they live in a community where the majority of people there are not Afrikaans speaking, and yet they are forced to be at a school because parents want better quality of education for their children. How concerned are you about that being used, that loophole being used by some SGBs to exclude some learners who want this good quality education, but they are being prevented because they don't speak that as their mother tongue at home?
I think it's also important that, so firstly, SGBs are incredibly important as a governance structure, because those are the oversight bodies in our schools and they're governance structures in our schools. But at the same time, SGBs are also bound by the Constitution. They are also bound by education laws in our country, the Schools Act, the National Education Act, and all of these things are very clear that you may not exclude people on the basis of language, on the basis of race, and whatever the SGBs do, they cannot discriminate against learners. And so I do also sometimes am concerned that there's been a lot of polarization or polarizing arguments about what's in the bill, what's not in the bill, what was initially there and what is not there. I think that's why I'm saying I don't think that some of the sections in the bill are insurmountable. There can be even the changing of wording where you can find that ultimately, remember, the appeal authority in any province is the HOD of that Department of Education. And so there has to be some way of working with the HOD, with the SGBs, if there are issues that need appealing. But I have to also just emphasize that no SGB is allowed to discriminate on the basis of language, on the basis of race. And so that SGB would be acting against the Constitution in itself. And so, you know, I'm quite interested to see what is the outcome of the President's deliberation. But for us, I mean, now my responsibility now, Clement, is to make sure that whatever the outcome of the bill, whether it's sent back to Parliament and it comes back or whether it is signed as it is, I've got to make sure that I unite the sector and make sure that we get on with the business of delivering quality education. Yeah,
I spoke to Helen Zille earlier today, who indicated that they're not ruling out the possibility of are challenging this in court if the president ultimately signs it. How do you then balance the two interests? Because you are a minister that comes from a DA that holds a particular position, but once the president signs it, you are constitutionally obligated to also respect that and push for the implementation of this as law.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, I think luckily I come from a political party that respects the rule of law and that understands constitutionalism on a deep level. And so we understood coming into the government of national unity that there were things that, or policies that we may not have agreed with the ANC when we went to the ANC government, when we came into the GNU. And that's, I suppose, the complexity, right, of such a governance arrangement. But at the end of the day, I have to understand what my oath says and what my responsibilities are as a minister. And as I say, luckily for me, I come from a party that has a deep understanding of what my constitutional obligations would be. And so if my political party decides that they would want to take the bill on review, ultimately I have to remain the Minister of Basic Education and do my job. I was, the party entrusted me with this responsibility, and the people of South Africa are looking to me to not be partisan in the execution of my work, regardless of the fact that I come from a political party.
That may hold a different position, yeah. Speaking of Helen Zille, she also indicated to me earlier that, and I quote here, none of the DA ministers use blue lights. She says DA ministers don't use both their ministerial homes in Cape Town and Tshwane. She says the ministers have agreed to share a house in Tshwane to avoid abusing state resources. Is that what you guys are doing right now?
We're definitely not using any blue lights, Clement. As you know, this was something that was even passed by the Western Cape government when Helen was the premier. And so, I mean, unless there is, in fact, this was in fact a conversation with the members of the DA that are in the executive, that unless there is a life-threatening, reason for why those blue lights must be used, there's no reason for that, because we've seen the abuse of them. We've seen, VIP protectors, running over people. And we must never also be detached from the very people we are meant to serve. Why must we be zooming through traffic as though we are not one of the same, we're not the people that we're here to serve? Ultimately, this whole thing of the political elite needs to be flattened. We're here as public servants, and so we need to act like it.
Will you be paying for your own water and electricity? That's what the DA was expecting of ANC ministers.
I'm made aware by the Minister of Public Works, my colleague Dean McPherson, that indeed there is a levy or fees that must be paid for if you're using any of the ministerial homes. So look, I mean, that's ultimately, I think that the broader question here is how will we make sure that some of the things that we were calling for from the opposition benches in terms of austerity measures, will we follow up on them? And I think we are approaching this with the same spirit to say, yes, we want to make sure that, unnecessary overseas trips, there's no need for you to take your partner and your children and your dog on an overseas trip, because I'm fighting Treasury to increase the budget of 300 billion rand. It doesn't send a very good message when I'm saying the education budget is small and shrinking in real terms over 3 years, but here I am spending, just splurging government money.
All right, Minister Gwarube, Basic Education Minister, thank you so much for making time for us on Face the Nation this evening. We've been asking you the question tonight, what you make of what transpired in that primary school in Katlehong on Monday. What do you make of how the community has also responded, and how concerned are you about the safety of our schools. Let's start with your tweets that have come through so far. Shorty says, I'm very much concerned about the safety of our children at school after the thuggery behavior of the men of God, Pastor Mboro. Desmond says, I'm worried about the safety at the schools. I think as communities, we must work together with government to make sure that our children are safe all the time. That Desmond Malapani in Boshahuk in outside, but they're not indicating outside of what. Nara says it is a concerning situation. Both learners and teachers are not safe at all. I think it's high time that the education department and the police work together to make sure that our schools are protected at all times. All right, that is, as the education minister indicated, gone are the days when the departments are working in silos. So it's important that all the stakeholders come together, including community members. This is not going to be resolved by the ministers, by the government. It's going to require you and I, because we are custodians of the very schools that are in our communities. Here are some of the WhatsApp voice notes that have come through.
The violation of schools is a very wrong conception that has been done nowadays in our school. Learning processes and the learners need to be protected at all times. We need to make sure that our schools have a proper security, private regulated security, so that everything can be in order. Reverend Tikapa Pastor Mboro must be arrested with immediate effect. No bail, nax. Tanama Hlope, Kuma, Selfandine.
Good evening, Clement, and your viewership. My name is Tlangelani Sidwell. Ojani at Luferen in Soweto. As long as we do not have a designated security companies in various schools, Clement, we are going to experience this kind of problem where people are just, inventing schools. So the safety of, our learners is being compromised. Department must fix this problem by bringing in security companies in various schools so that the safety of learners can be guaranteed. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for your tweets and your WhatsApp voice notes. After the break, we're going to have a conversation with the Iranian ambassador to South Africa. Stay with us. Welcome back. 4 of the 5 suspects arrested in connection with the violence at the Matsidiso Primary School in Katlehong on Gauteng's East Rand this week are expected to appear at the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court tomorrow. A video has been circulating on social media showing 3 men violently threatening the livelihoods of teachers and learners at the school. One of them is well-known South African pastor Pasika Mboro Motswaneng, who is seen wielding a panga, and another man is seen with an assault rifle on the school's premises. Let's bring in now the Gauteng Provincial Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Tomi Mtombeni, who joins us now via Teams. Lieutenant General, thank you so much for making time for us. How tense is the situation in Katlehong this evening after the residents are alleged to have torched Pastor Mboro's church?
Greeting Clement and the greetings to the viewers at home. One can clearly confirm that after the incident of today, we were in a position to can deploy our integrated workforce. These include the public order policing for Metro Police as well as the South African Police Service, and of course the local police station. So I was on the crime scene, and the situation was stable as I left there late in the afternoon. So one can confirm to say currently the situation is stable.
And as the police, are there plans to maintain some presence in that area throughout the night to avoid further incidents flaring up? What's the plan?
Well, the plan is that we'll remain in place. As you know, that that area is just adjacent to the police station. We'll make sure that we remain in that space. I've spoken to the workforce while I was there on the area which is affected. I've spoken to both the commanders for South African Police Service Public Order Policing, as well as Ekurhuleni Metro Police. I've spoken to Deputy Chief Mkwanazi, who was there on site, and to say we'll have to remain there and we'll have to be vigilant and make sure that the communities are and that feel safe.
Yeah. Do you have any leads as the police regarding who's behind the torching of this church, the Incredible Happenings Church, and have any people been arrested regarding this incident?
What we can say or confirm is that a case has been opened for arson were related to the church. Hopefully we'll be in a position to can unmask the people who are responsible. What we are calling upon is the close cooperation or collaboration with the community, as we know for the fact that when these crimes they get committed, I'll say some of the community members were nearby there who can share light so that we can be in a position to can bring the perpetrators into book.
Mm-hmm. We now understand that 5 people have been arrested on charges relating to intimidation and violence. What led to the arrest of the 5th suspect? There are some reports suggesting that the suspect was arrested for assaulting the station commander at that Katlehong North Police Station. What can you share with us?
Well, we know for the fact as there's a video clip which is circulating for yesterday in a school at Teetering Primary School. We have worked tirelessly up until the early hours of this morning, where we managed to arrest 4 of the people. Amongst those 4, one of them is linked to the assault of the station commander, the local station commander for Katlehong North. Then this other 5th one, which we have arrested during the course of the day, we were trying to put together the puzzles and linking up with NPA, National Prosecuting Authority, whereupon through those linkage facilitation, based on the statement, we managed to secure a warrant of arrest, which is called J50, and we executed that warrant of arrest for the 5th suspect. So all in all, it's a total of 5 people who have been arrested. We will, of course, divulge their names as and when they made their first appearance in court.
All right. Gauteng Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Tommy Mtombeni, thank you so much for making time for us this evening on Face the Nation. Let's wrap up with this now. Iran says it doesn't want to worsen tensions in the Middle East, but believes that it needs to punish Israel to prevent further instability in the region. The statement comes ahead of what Israel expects to be a retaliatory prolonged missile attack from Iran. Iranian ambassador to South Africa, Mansour Shakib Mer, joins us tonight, and he will be speaking to us through a translator. Ambassador, thank you so much for making time for us on Face the Nation this evening. Now, Iran's response to the assassination of this Hamas leader, what is that response? Will it be retaliating?
سلام عرض میکنم خدمت شما، شب شما بخیر و تشکر میکنم از این برنامه شما و تشکر میکنم از اینکه ما رو به این برنامه دعوت کرد.
Greetings to everyone and good evening. Thank you very much for having us on this program.
در مورد سوال شما باید جواب بدم که آقای اسماعیل هنیه به دعوت رسمی دولت جمهوری اسلامی ایران برای شرکت در مراسم تنفیذ تحلیف ریاست محترم جمهوری ما در تهران به سر برد.
To answer your question, Mr. Ismail Haniyeh was in Iran and he was officially invited to Iran to attend the inauguration ceremony of the new president of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
حدود 70 کشور، مقامات 70 کشور در این مراسم حاضر بودند.
The guests from approximately 70 countries attended this ceremony,
از جمله وزیر امور خارجه شما در این مراسم حضور داشت.
including Mr. Ramola, the Honorable Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa.
خب یک روز بعد از این مراسم آقای اسماعیل هنیه در محل استراحت خودش ترور شد.
Well, one day after the ceremony, Mr. Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in his accommodation in Tehran.
شما میدونید آقای اسماعیل هنیه فردی آزادیخواه و مبارز بوده.
As you know, Mr. Ismail Haniyeh was a freedom seeker and he was after the freedom of Palestine.
این یک جنایت غیرقانونی و از نظر ما محکومه.
This is an illegal assassination and crime and it is unacceptable to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
خیلی از کشورها این ترور رو محکوم کردند.
Many countries condemned this assassination.
ما بر اساس تکالیف حقوقی که داریم از نظر حقوقی و سیاسی پیگیری کردیم موضوع رو.
Legally and politically speaking and diplomatically speaking, the Islamic Republic of Iran pursued a solution for this assassination.
ما فوراً درخواست تشکیل جلسه شورای امنیت سازمان ملل رو دادیم.
We asked for an emergency meeting of the UNSC.
اما متاسفانه به دلیل اعمال نفوذ و اعمال نظر برخی از قدرت‌های بزرگ مثل امریکا و انگلیس موضوع به نتیجه نرسید.
But unfortunately, given the influence of some powers such as the United States of America and the UK, we were not able to, table our request.
اسرائیل حکومت اسرائیل ترورهای زیادی رو انجام داده در داخل و خارج از ایران.
The Israeli regime has carried out many assassinations, whether inside Iran or outside Iran.
این افراد هم از فلسطینی‌ها بودند، هم از دانشمندان هسته‌ای ما. تعداد زیادی از فرماندهان نظامی ما رو به شهادت رسوند.
The people assassinated were among these people were Palestinians, and there were many Iranians among these people, whether people from our military or our top and prominent nuclear scientists.
So what's the next step then, Ambassador? Does Iran see this as provocation? Because this is not the first time that Israel is responsible for an attack on Iran. You lost several officials from that drone strike in Syria on your embassy in that country a few months ago. How does Iran then respond?
شما به نکته خوبی اشاره کردید.
You raised a very good point.
همطور که شاهد بودید در اول آوریل سفارت ما در دمشق توسط اسرائیل مورد حمله قرار گرفت.
The world witnessed that our embassy in Syria in Damascus was attacked by the Israeli regime in the 1st of April.
7 نفر از همکارای ما در اونجا به شهادت رسیدند.
We lost 7 of our colleagues.
تعداد زیادی از مستشارای نظامی ما در سوریه توسط اسرائیل ترور شدند.
Numerous Iranian military advisors have been assassinated in Syria.
همچنین در داخل ایران دانشمندان هسته‌ای ما توسط اسرائیل ترور شدند.
And Iranian prominent nuclear scientists have been assassinated by the Israeli regime inside Iran.
ما در پاسخ به حمله اول آوریل حدود 2 هفته بعد پاسخ دادیم به این حمله.
In response to the attack by the Israelis on the 1st of April, Iran made its retaliation about 2 weeks later.
شما شاهد بودید که خیلی از کشورها و قدرت‌های فرامنطقه‌ای در دفاع از اسرائیل حضور داشتند.
And you witnessed that many countries, whether from the region or from outside the region, helped Israel to defend itself during this attack.
و این نشون داد که اسرائیل شکننده است و به تنهایی قادر به دفاع از خودش نیست.
And this showed to the world that Israel is fragile and is not able to defend itself on its own.
So what's going to be the response of Iran? Are we on the verge of perhaps a wider regional war? And what do you think this latest attack means for the peace talks in Gaza?
ببینید عملیاتی که انجام شد نقض حاکمیت ملی ما و تمامیت ارضی ما بود.
The operation carried out in Iran, the assassination of Mr. Haniyeh, was a blatant violation of Iran's territorial integrity and sovereignty.
حقوق بین الملل به ما اجازه میده که دفاع کنیم از خودمون و علیه متجاوز اقداماتی رو انجام بده.
The international law allows the Islamic Republic of Iran to defend itself and take some measures against the aggressor.
من همونطوری که خدمت شما گفتم ما یه سلسله اقدامات سیاسی و حقوقی رو آغاز کردیم.
As I told you, the Islamic Republic of Iran has adopted certain legal and diplomatic measures.
در صحن شورای امنیت خواستیم محکوم بشه این اقدام.
And we asked for the condemnation of this assassination in the UN General Assembly.
درخواست تشکیل فوری سازمان همکاری اسلامی رو داشتیم.
And we asked the OIC member states to have an emergency meeting.
اما این حق رو برای خودمون قائل هستیم که با شدت این تجاوز آشکار به حقوق خودمون رو جواب بدیم.
But we maintain the right to answer this transparent aggression against our soil and territory.
پاسخ ما قطعی خواهد بود.
Our response will definitely come
تا جوابی به گستاخی رژیم صهیونیستی رژیم اسرائیل بدیم.
To be an answer to the atrocity and the audacity of the Israeli regime.
The Iranian ambassador to South Africa, Masour Shakib Mekh, thank you so much for making time for us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And thanks to you for watching Face the Nation tonight. And once again, condolences to the family of veteran actress Koni Chueme. She has died aged 72. Family members have posted a short statement on her Instagram account. Chueme passed away at Garden City Hospital in Johannesburg. The internationally acclaimed actress was part of the Black Panther franchise and local telenovela Gomorrah. See you on Thursday at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.